Welcome to this episode of Spotlight On, a series of interviews brought to you by Overdeck Family Foundation. Here we sit down with the nonprofit leaders shaping the future of education and talk to them about innovation, evidence, and growth. My name is Pete Lavorini, and I manage the Foundation's Innovative Schools grantmaking portfolio, which aims to expand access to tech-enabled, student-centered learning environments across kindergarten through ninth grade. I'll be your host for today's Spotlight on Growth. And joining me is Michelle Brown, the founder and CEO of CommonLit, a nonprofit in my portfolio that's on a mission to unlock the potential of every child by accelerating their reading, writing, speaking, and problem-solving skills. CommonLit offers teachers and schools resources for top-notch literacy instruction, from a full-year ELA curriculum to benchmark assessments and formative data. Before she founded CommonLit in 2013, Michelle began her career as a reading teacher at a high-poverty school in Mississippi, and later as an English teacher in Boston, where she redesigned the existing reading curriculum. As a result, her students exceeded the state average in reading by 9 percentage points. She has received innovation awards from Teach for America, AT&T Aspire, Fast Forward, and the Harvard Graduate School of Education. She was also a finalist for the Forbes 30 Under 30 Change the World competition. Welcome, Michelle.
Thanks, Pete. It's really good to be here.
Oh, it's so great for you to join us today. And I want to start this conversation today by you telling us a bit more about the origin story of CommonLit. And in particular, I want to know more about how your experience as a classroom teacher informed your understanding of what good literacy instruction is and eventually informed your path to founding CommonLit.
Yeah, absolutely. So my journey into K-12 starts exactly after I graduated college. I graduated college from Butler University with an English major. And my first job graduating college was teaching in a high poverty school in rural Mississippi through Teach for America. And so the classroom that I walked into on day one, just to paint a picture of this, is I walked into a classroom that really had nothing. It had no literature, it had no library, it had no books. And I was a first year teacher, really without a clue of how to build a curriculum or build my students toward proficiency. And so that experience, there's a lot about what I could share about that experience teaching as a first year teacher. But there are two things that really stand out for that experience from that experience that sort of shaped who I am and also motivated me to start CommonLit. And so the first thing is that I came to believe and understand, and I believe this very profoundly and deeply, is that we are deeply underestimating what children can do. And I believe that deeply, and also that we are deeply underestimating, particularly what children in poverty can do. And I saw that really every day and in, all of the materials and, structures. And I've really brought that into my work today. The second thing that really stuck with me just is I came to have just so much empathy for what it means to be a classroom teacher, and particularly a classroom teacher in adolescent literacy. And so I was a middle school teacher. And just to put it succinctly, the job is frankly just felt really unsustainable. I felt like I didn't have like the basic materials to do my job in the classroom. And what that looked like for me is I was in survival mode and just scrambling on nights and weekends to find just the basic materials to do my job and really coming up short. And so, after that, I continued teaching and I moved to Boston and taught seventh grade reading still in the Uncommon Schools Network. That network is tremendous, but what they had was a curriculum that had been written that had been perfected by veteran teachers over the course of like 13 years with annotated notes from teachers with really incredible texts and literature for kids that really just made an enormous difference. And so, my students outperformed, their peers in the suburbs by 9 percentage points that year. And I saw just how incredible those just having materials could really accelerate my pedagogy as a teacher, my students' engagement. And kind of once you kind of click, I realized how success begets success in the classroom. And that's when you can really start to see kids really light up and grow, which is what I love to do.
Um, Thank you so much for that, Michelle. So much of what you just shared resonated with me. As you know, I myself am a former sixth grade teacher,
Mhm.
and what that first day of walking into a classroom and just seeing no library,
Panic.
it's panic, and it's also just to your point about the under expectation we have of our students. It's just so heartbreaking. It's just so sad that we're at that time we weren't providing these excellent, incredible students with uh, windows into the world around them and mirrors into the type of people that they are and can be. And I think what's so great about CommonLit is that you have played a real role in changing that paradigm and really making sure that students all across our country have access to some really incredible materials. And so that's my attempt at a transition into where we'll go next, which is talking a little bit more about the current state of literacy in K-12, which we know that for all the progress we made in making sure that kids have access to high quality instructional materials, post-pandemic recovery has been uneven at best, and many educators are still helping students just catch up, right? Not even advance where they were, but just catch up from that. So I'm curious, from your vantage point, what do you see are some of the biggest challenges facing educators right now, and how does CommonLit work to address them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think unfortunately where we're at today is that still, I mean, we talk to thousands of teachers, every day. Is that, and what we see, in 2024 is that we still haven't solved for this like unsustainable workload of a teacher. And unfortunately, we are still post pandemic where teachers are still kind of in survival mode in a lot of cases when it comes to having like the basic materials, bandwidth, time, structures to really like be able to show up and
Yeah,
provide and use best practices consistently every day in the classroom.
yeah,
Being a K-12 teacher is exhausting.
yeah,
And I use this analogy that it's a bit like asking the astronaut who we're like sending into space to also be the engineer that writes all the plans and engineers the whole rocket ship, and like creates the command control center, then also goes into space. And so it's just so much. So, I think that's just like bandwidth and sustainability is challenge number one. And I think challenge number two, we're seeing this a lot too in the media, is just about engagement. I think that teachers are concerned about student engagement in the classroom, waning reports of like waning classroom engagement, disengagement. We're hearing a lot about adolescent mental health right now too. So, we're getting like this acute awareness too of disengagement at like the secondary level, like for adolescents. So ages like 10 to 16. And so, and teachers, I think, are really on the front lines of this and they're seeing this, pan out. For adolescents in the classroom today. So Common Lit is, you asked like, what are the biggest challenges and then how do we address them?
yeah,
So CommonLit addresses this in a few ways. But so first on the teacher bandwidth side, essentially what we have attempted to provide is a core curriculum program that takes a lot of that planning and a lot of burden of creating instructional materials off of the shoulders of individual teachers in the classroom with a fully planned out, modules and even year-long scope of everything that a teacher needs every day to use best practices. And our curriculum program attempts to make those best practices routine for the teacher to really take that burden, just so that you can start to build momentum in the classroom. And then on the engagement piece, it's really about, we're really doubled down on how do you engage adolescents in a classroom about literacy? How do you get them excited about all this literature and off their phones and really like thinking and talking to their peers about all this classic literature and new literature. And we do that. We're really focused on peer-to-peer interaction in the classroom. So that's one way is that, we really believe that adolescents are, have so much to offer.
Yeah.
And so much of their lives is taking away control from them. And we want to empower them to be leaders in the classroom, to lead classroom discussions, to talk to their peers about these topics, and to really, put the intellectual heavy lifting on them to grapple with a lot of these big themes. And we're seeing some really exciting results with that kind of twofold approach.
Great. Again, everything that you're naming is just resonating so much with me, Michelle. And I'm curious that based on the work that you've done so far, what have you learned about the specific strategies that can reduce that burden on teachers and put them in a place where they can sort of create those engaging environments for students?
Yeah, I think, and I was a teacher too, and I think this goes back to having routines.
Huh.
And so that is really our thesis and our theory of change is just imagine if you're walking into a classroom, how good it would feel when things are so unpredictable, when you have
Yeah.
teenagers and adolescents. That it's really nice to be able to have a couple of routines in your back pocket that you can pull out whenever the energy dies or the discussion kind of falls flat or students like really aren't getting the point. We have built out those routines for teachers that they can fall back on in those moments. And that is really for class discussion, for peer-to-peer engagement, or for just sitting quietly sometimes and just reading and enjoying a piece of literature. And we have just like a handful that research has shown make a big difference.
Yeah, I love that. It makes me think of just the number of times that uh, when you try something in a classroom and it just falls flat, right? I'm sure
Totally.
I'm
Every day.
not every day, right? And so knowing that you have these resources to fall back to and routines just feels like what a useful set of and just really impactful set of tools in front of you. So that's great. And I want to turn now to just really thinking about CommonLit's trajectory. You have seen an impressive amount of growth in
Crazy.
yeah, just really impressive in a relatively short amount of time since CommonLit has been out there. Tell us a bit more about what that trajectory has looked like and what you see are the key factors behind CommonLit's success.
Totally. Yeah, it's kind of Pete, kind of a wild story just in terms of the speed of all of this. But basically, I started CommonLit 10 years ago. So I've been a social entrepreneur for 10 years. And 10 years ago, just to put this in perspective, it was just me, with a Wix website as a graduate school student, with a couple of volunteers. We had about 30 techs on a website, like lessons. That's what it looked like. And over that 10-year horizon, the pandemic actually was a big turning point in terms of volume of user acquisition we were getting. If you can imagine, what the value proposition of CommonLit in that moment in March 2020, how enormous it was, right?
Sure.
Here
Yeah.
is an app that has thousands, over 4,000 lessons, digital lessons for children that can be assigned digitally, free for teachers and schools to access. Print, it works offline in like low bandwidth. And when like internet is intermittent, it saves answers. It's available in 37 different languages and free, right?
Agree.
So that value proposition in that moment, as you can imagine, March 2020 was just enormous. That month and into April, just to put it in perspective, we were getting 32,000 new registered users per day on average for
Hmm.
like
Wow.
a 8 to 10 week period, just consistently. It was like felt a little bit like drinking from a fire hose is kind of what it was like. But fast forward, today we've really metabolized that growth. And we have like robust services for schools as well that are part of paid, program services that drive program revenue to our nonprofit. That includes professional development for schools and also valid assessments for schools as well, like benchmarks offered 3 times a year um, as a best practice. Today we have over 3,000 schools that are paying for those services and growing tons of momentum and about 7 million children who like actively rely on our platform, for instruction. And so it's crazy, but I can share that in the latest RAND report that came out, CommonLit was the #1 most popular instructional tool among middle school reading teachers today. Yeah.
Wow. Congratulations, Michelle. I think that that's such a testament to the quality and value of what you've built at CommonLit and what your team continues to provide. So you are CommonLit is both a educational nonprofit with your mission at its core, but you're also a tech company from the beginning, as you mentioned, back on Wix, which is crazy to think that it wasn't just on MySpace, but on Wix around the same time. Um, how do you think that this unique combination of being a tech company and a mission-driven ed nonprofit benefits your teachers and their students?
Yeah. So it's a really unique business model that we have. So it's essentially that we are, a nonprofit 501(c)(3) operating a SaaS business, a software as a service business, and operating like a tech company. And we're really, one thing that's like a key to our success is we're borrowing a lot of the best practices from tech that have made a lot of billionaires for better or for worse in the past, several decades, but we're putting those best practices to work for a nonprofit mission.
Yeah.
And so, what that means for us when you take tech company and nonprofit and you mash them together, is you get scale, right? So, like the 7 million children, because technology helps us deliver our services more efficiently and to many, many more teachers and students than we would otherwise, operating as a, 100-person team. More or less. And so if we weren't a tech company, our scale and our reach would barely, scratch the surface of what we're able to do. But because we have an app and we're leveraging those techniques. So one is just scale. The other thing is that we're able to provide, because of the scale and the efficiency gains that we get from scale as a SaaS business, is we're able to provide a huge part of what we offer for free because our costs, it actually are very efficient and go down over time with our scale. That's kind of like the beauty of a tech company model, is just like the per unit cost actually like reduce. And so that allows us to, provide our entire supplemental library, for example, for free for individual teachers, which is like why we are like the #1 most popular, And then third is mission specific. So because we have our nonprofit mission, we have built-in incentives to go where there's no market incentive to go. But because we're focused on, solving a problem and making our world a more equitable place. So that means we actually have structural incentives to serve underserved schools first, and schools facing significant budget crunches and challenges. Those schools are actually our ICP. They're our ideal customer profile. And, it also allows us to invest in designing for students and like special populations of students that otherwise the market might not serve, like students with disabilities or MLL students who speak multiple languages. So we have like a special and structural incentive to focus there on impact with no caveats, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Michelle, I want to offer one more, if it's
Yep.
okay, and I'd love to
Sure.
actually sort of
Yeah.
bring you into. So one
Mhm.
of the things that I really appreciate about the work you do is, and you started to talk about, is this emphasis on getting feedback from your teachers in
Mhm.
real time. And I think we've talked a lot about you being a technology company as opposed to some of like the more legacy
Mhm.
textbook providers who would, if they even do get feedback from teachers and students in the field, they'd have to spend millions upon millions of dollars to distribute new versions of their textbooks if they would even do it. But you're able to make changes in real time. And I'm wondering if you might sort of give us maybe a few examples of how this real time feedback from teachers have actually led to a better, more impactful CommonLit product.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they are the source of how we iterate, right? They
Yeah.
give us the answers. So, for like how we need to change or iterate on our tool or operate differently, is like because we're a nonprofit, it's not just like, oh, we're customer managing and taking your feedback, right? We actually like have a special incentive to change our product so that the impact grows and grows and grows, right? So my North Star is like the effect size that we have on teachers and students. So it's not just about customer management, but we have a whole team that's staffed, two teams actually staffed to absorb feedback at the moment. And so this is anywhere from, like the actual content on our site. A lot of it is about the actual content itself, the onboarding that we offer. We're able to flag like areas of our app where we're not, supporting special populations of students as best as we can, like in terms of making our site more accessible to students with screen readers, for example, or
Yeah,
things like that.
that's
Mhm.
great. Um, and you started to talk about your impact. And we care deeply about impact at Overdeck Family Foundation. And I'm curious how you are measuring your impact on student learning engagement and what your plans to do may change in the future to do that.
Yeah, I love this question. So,
Well, thank you.
so we have leading and lagging indicators of our impact, right? And so a lagging indicator, but important indicator of our impact is actually just the number of students, the volumes of students that we're actually moving from being not proficient in reading into a category of being proficient in reading, right? But we don't know that it's lagging because we don't know that just like until the end of the year when they, because we administer a pre-test and a post-test. So what we do have is as a leading indicator is a metric, we call it a dosage. I don't love that term, but if you have another idea, let me know. But it's essentially at what threshold of using CommonLit do we see that students are likely to get those proficiency results and gains at the end of the year? And so, we look and track to see, how many students and the percentage of students that were moving into that dosage threshold for impact. So, last year we moved roughly 1.5 million children into that category. And every year we try to get more efficient at that and bring like a larger volume of students into that category. Why is that important? Because a child entering the next grade already behind in reading, studies show they just get more and more behind. And so if we are just focused on, that they're entering the next grade on track and like ready to absorb the complexity of the material in front of them.
Great. And I will also just draw attention to the fact that your commitment to impact is so great that you recently applied for and were awarded a Department of Education grant to conduct a rigorous evaluation of the impact of students engaging with Common Lit on their overall proficiency rates. And it's something I think not many organizations would be willing to do that work. And the fact that you're holding up that microscope to the work you're doing it's commendable. And I'm glad you're doing it. And I'm glad that we will be able to support it too. Um, switching gears a bit now, we recently provided CommonLit a supplemental grant of $1 million to integrate more artificial intelligence into your product. Tell us a bit about the role you think that AI will play in supporting your continued growth and success.
Yeah, so I think for CommonLit specifically, I'll just say that I think that CommonLit has a special advantage as a nonprofit and as a tech company to take advantage of this, like, of the enormous power and potential power of AI, right? That's like kind of scary and unknown, but definitely enormous. And so, from the broadest, highest altitude perspective of thinking about AI, where I sit and where our team sits is like, yeah, let's do this. If we can actually figure out how to harness this technology to make it sustainable, to engineer it and architect it in a way that makes that effect size grow and grow and grow, toward our key goals, I think, it could be really profound. So, we are at this point just gearing up to take a big swing with this. But there's just a lot of planning that goes in. So you asked a little bit about like, what are some of the pitfalls or things we're thinking about? We're grappling with what a lot of organizations are grappling with when it comes to thinking about this technology. One thing I'll say about AI is that it's very different just to like engineer like a whiz bang, feature on like someone's, an engineer's local drive or laptop or something that seems really cool. It's a totally different thing to take that, really cool feature and then sustain it in like a production app code
Yeah.
that has to have 100%, 99% uptime for 7 million kids every day, and like will be absorbed by our own revenues and sustainable for the long term. So just all of the thinking and architecting that goes into thinking about how we can take AI into a production quality like app like CommonLit, the bar is really high. And so we're incredibly grateful to the Overdeck Family Foundation for like fueling that, even like having paving the way for us to even start thinking about scoping and planning to take that big swing. It's been really enormous, and we're just really excited to continue with that learning trajectory into next year.
Um, us too. And are there any particular, challenges facing teachers or facing students that you are most inclined to think that the AI technology will be able to solve or address?
Um, Yeah, so we're pretty cautious when it comes to AI going direct to students at
Hmm.
this moment. I think in the long run, when we figure out some student privacy and even like when it shows efficacy, I think we'd be more inclined to experiment with that. But what we see the application and the opportunity right now has to do with empowering the teacher to be like the best leader of the classroom that she can be and to reduce the administrative workload on her, so that they can show up, teachers can really show up, and make classrooms that those sort of like collaborative student-led environments that we like know make a really big difference.
Yeah, I love that.
Mhm.
In a way, it's sort of using the technology to allow teachers to do what they do best.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's great.
Exactly.
Um, so one of the things you mentioned was that you're hoping to increase usage of CommonLit in order to
Mhm.
improve your impact. What are your plans to put this into action?
Yeah. So the biggest way that we're going to grow our impact is through our program revenue and our services that we offer that are at the district level. And so that is like the school and district level. And so that channel to scale is our largest and most and biggest opportunity at the moment for reaching more students and for deepening the impact that we have. Because what we see is that schools that purchase our services and get access to our professional learning actually reach that threshold of utilization of CommonLit and then realize the gains for kids. So success begets success with a school when they, make CommonLit a priority and although our pricing is relatively low compared to competitors. We see that there's like this special positive effect when they purchase it, have skin in the game, make it a priority, make space for the program at a school. So, we're hoping just in general to 3x our reach and impact over a 5-year time horizon.
Great. So hearing from you that the big push to increase usage is just better supporting schools and make it something that they value more and are willing to spend their precious resources on. And I think, well, so now I'm curious, like, what else, how are you thinking about adding value, adding to the value that schools get out of it? And in particular, like, what about how you're adding value for the educators who are using it?
So we really see a huge opportunity in terms of professional learning, that we offer for teachers in schools that are adopting our core program. As you can imagine, when you're changing like a textbook provider, switching costs are really high, or when you're introducing a whole new academic program for literacy in a school or in a district with 10 middle schools or something like that. There's an awful lot of change management involved in making that switch. And so we see that if we're actually going to grow our reach and our scale, that investing there and doubling down on supporting schools with those change management and adding value to our services through like how much like we can be on the ground, our presence, how much consulting we can offer, how much leadership support and administrator support we can offer. We see that as so key, going hand in hand with our plans for growing our impact.
Great. Michelle, this has been such a really fun conversation to learn more about CommonLit's journey to create better value for your teachers and for your students, and sort of how you've leveraged technology and how you've partnered with your teachers to really create that impact. And what I want to think about now is sort of beyond CommonLit and really beyond the moment we're now, which is a question we ask all of our guests in this series, which is looking ahead to the next decade in education. What makes you hopeful?
So I thought about this in advance, and I'm really excited to answer it. So I am really excited that there seems to be a bigger focus and momentum for adolescent students. So for those students that are, you know, ages like 10 to 15. I was a middle school teacher and sometimes felt like there was so much focus, even now in the market on like this idea of reading grade by grade 3 in
Yeah.
elementary school, which is so, so critical. But just if you zoom out from like a policy level perspective, we're not doing that, right? So many students, if not the majority, aren't reading proficiently by grade 3. And those students are now entering middle school as adolescents into these formative years that are so critical for their social development, for their brain development, just for a society to have like young adolescents that, are seen, that feel supported. I just am hopeful and am excited that there seems to be more of an awareness and a focus on like that we're kind of not just like throwing in the towel on secondary. So I'm excited to be here in the next decade, and we'll still be doubling down in this area.
I could not agree more,
Mhm.
Michelle. I think the more we really think about all of our students and all their needs and what they need, right? Because
Mhm.
middle schoolers need something different than early
Yeah,
kids, and I'm excited to see and support CommonLit's role in figuring out how to make sure that those adolescent students get what they need, and so glad that you are bringing your leadership to that challenge. So thank you for being a part of this conversation. Thank you for the work you're doing on behalf of kids across the country. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it, Pete. It's been really fun. Thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you, the listener watcher of this, for joining us for this episode of Spotlight On, brought to you by Overdeck Family Foundation. We hoped you enjoyed it. And be the first to know when our next episode hits by subscribing to our YouTube channel and our foundation's letter. Bye for now.